want to take this in a slightly different direction because I want to get to something with archetypes, which is so as you're going through these changes, not unlike a 20-year-old,
Yeah.
are you do you have any inner wants to like change your clothing, listen to different music? Like, are you changing up your style at all to go along with this? Or do you have that nagging at you at all?
I mean, it's funny you should say that, but sure. Yeah. Look, I got the earrings that I could have gotten in 1967, but didn't because I never rebelled against my parents. And so, from a reductionist psychological point of view, yeah, the hat. I mean, well, I've had those for longer, but yeah, sure, sure. Yeah,
Hmm.
there is that level of things. And that's what
Like, are you switching archetypes? Because I tend to nowadays see archetypes as sort of a conscious cloud or a fog that you can step into, and then suddenly it wants to rearrange you, and so
yeah,
to go along with your thinking.
my relationship to the idea of archetypes has never been very important. Um, there were things in Jung uh, that really struck me as fascinating and important. Um, and even more so for James Hillman, who's a Jungian. But I know Hillman's work better than Jung's, at least in part because there's less of it. Um, but the issue of worrying about archetypes was not of interest to me, and maybe why? Um, um, because many Jungians, because this would have been true, but I won't bother to say it, because they can easily be understood in an excessively dry and impersonal way, you know? Like, which archetype are you under? Well, probably the old man or the child. I guess,
But
um,
then, how do you explain that when people change drastically their thinking or their, they would say their spirit or something like that, that they become a cliche of a different type, as opposed to the cliche that they just were, in terms of what they listen to for music, even in terms of how they dress, in terms of using incense,
how do
whatever
how
it
do
is,
how do I explain it? I guess I
man
don't.
buns.
I guess I don't explain it. Look, I mean, what does Hillman say? I mean, it's not something that I've thought of. Well, yeah, I have a little bit. Um, what does Hillman say? He kind of he doesn't make a big deal about archetypes either, though they're certainly present in his work. What he objected to was the misuse of the term as if archetypes were things or
Hmm.
formal patterns which could be definitional. And what he proposes, um, not really instead, but as an alternate framing of the archetypes, which I mean, it's simply a matter. I mean, in some sense, it's simply a matter of style. You don't want to think of archetypes as, oh yeah, let's reach up and get the old man because it's going to look exactly the same every time you pick up the archetype of the old man. No, it's not like that. It's like the Greek gods, the pantheon of the Greek gods, and what you begin to realize is that the figure of one god kind of merges into that of the next one, and it's it's a it's a rather than thinking of archetypes as A, B, C, and so on, it's like what you said a little while ago, this sort of cloud of mm, characteristics that blend one into another, and so yes, right now you're activating. I mean, I don't like to talk like that. I just don't like to think that way. It's too quasi-scientific.
Right. So you just want to end up the hippie who likes tie-dye.
Yeah.
You don't want to know how you got there.
No, let's take that really seriously.
Okay.
um, so okay. I think I can take that really seriously. Oh, this is actually really good. I don't know whether this I don't know whether this is true. True. I don't know whether this is a good, accurate representation, but it's something I'm feeling right now. Okay. Um, I was I was talking to Marco yesterday. Let's see. I should be careful.
People don't
But
know
I
who
don't,
Marco is.
nobody knows who Marco is,
Okay.
except everybody who knows me. Um, but I'm pretty sure he wouldn't give a shit about this. Um, and we were talking about my Iboga experiences, and I understood him, I think now wrongly, to be giving me advice about how I should understand my experience. And I got really mad. And I don't get mad very often, or when I do, I repress it. And so it was really kind of nice to realize, oh, I'm really pretty pissed off. And what I was pissed off about was a really general. This that was the I was experiencing what he was doing, and this isn't what he was trying to do, as telling me what to experience. And I resist that at the deepest possible level because what I want is to have a, I mean, the words are hard, but okay, we'll just use a few, a genuine, individual, personal, intimate experience of my own.
Hmm.
And also, so that's fantastic. And then if I came out of that and I appeared to other people as the 72-year-old 1965 hippie with earrings and tie-dyes, but it was really me, I'm great with that. That not a problem. This is who I actually turned out to be. Actually, if that would literally turned out to be true, I'd love every bit of it. um, but if it worked the other way around, if I decided, gosh, I really wish I had been, which is true too, that I really would have had, but I didn't. That would be putting on a persona rather than discovering your true self. I'm not at all sure there is a true self, or I mean, there may be a long sequence of true selves, but and maybe this was a good thing that I got from my mother, the sense that don't tell me what to do. you know, if I and there's a sense in which that fits. Let's try this. There's a sense in which that fits in beautifully with what Jung had in mind for individuation, is that and Corbin as well. That and here's the Vaeni connection. Look, I can tell you the truth, but it won't do you any good until you experience it yourself. Poof, end of story. And if I'm a therapist, I can kind of point you in what I think might be a useful direction for you to have the experience yourself. But nobody can have it for you. And that's precisely Corbin's take on theology and angelomorphosis and why he was so against institutional religions, because he said, all those institutional forms of religion, they tell you to put on archetypes. Here's what you do. Here's how you do it. And then you will be then saved or a good person. And Corbin says, no, 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 no. That's not what God wants. God wants you to meet, boom, your angel on your own. And then and Jung said somewhere, somebody asked him if the world had any hope of surviving humanity. He said, well, it depends on how many people can actually individuate. Oh, and Corbin would have said, I think, essentially the same thing. If people individuate in enough numbers, then we'll be okay. But if not, whoosh, it's over. And so you can't put this stuff on from the outside. And I will shut up in just a second. But when I read Urgency, there's a couple paragraphs in there that I just thought, oh, right. And you were standing in my reading of you even further out than either Corbin or Jung in your extreme insistence that, no, it's not religious, it's not psychology, it's just truth. But the only person who can experience it is you. And for me, it was like, well, yeah, Jung is kind of a psychologist and Corbin is kind of a mystical theologian, but what Jeremy's saying is that no, it's bigger than any of that. And
Well,
that really
again,
nailed me. That just nailed
Jung
me.
Jung gave away in this book. Jung says pretty early on that he's meditating, and when Easterners, although I think he says Orientals, just like First Nations people are savages. This is the
Yeah,
language of
sure,
the day,
sure.
folks.
Yeah.
When the Orientals are meditating, they're doing it. They see all this stuff, the Red Book type stuff, as a distraction, and so they're meditating essentially to achieve nothingness, to see beyond the distraction, whereas he was meditating to go into that quote unquote distraction and understand it from the inside. So to me, that's it. Like that's, oh, okay, aha, we chicken dinner, winner chicken dinner. That's what you're doing. That's why all of this is so like, because he wasn't interested in quote unquote truth. He wasn't interested in self annihilation for its own sake, or even seeing beyond the distraction. He wanted to go into the unconscious and tinker around and understand it from within
Yeah.
it and not
Yeah.
transcend it.
That's probably fair. Yeah, that's probably fair. Although, I'm one of the people that keeps popping into my mind, and I honestly don't know his work well, as you know, but Peter Kingsley's been all through this Jung thing, and he would be the one who he knows Jung way better than I do. But I think that's right for Jung. I mean, his job was to be a psychotherapist. And, he was trained in Bergholzli Psychiatric Hospital, and most of his patients were psychotic. And so when he started having these experiences, it was like, oh shit. So that was his framing for this. And so, I mean, maybe this is true, maybe it isn't, but one way to understand why he was interested in the things as he was, because that was his job. I mean, it's no good to walk into a room full of psychotics and say, hey, this is all nonsense. You guys should all transcend. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, so you got to work with what you got.
Well, just an interesting side note, because I don't know that we talked about this on the show. We probably did in your class, but just that Peter Kingsley was someone that you didn't want to read because of his whatever arrogance, and I was trying to get you to read him. And it turns out that, one of the things that I loved about him was how he takes it to scholars and just says, that what I'm saying is true about this stuff. And you were one of those scholars that he was talking about, and I didn't realize that. You'd probably be best friends now.
I mean, since it's right out there, there's a yeah. This is actually personally therapeutic. The one thing that I found, and I haven't read his stuff in ages, that I found really pushed my button about Peter's writing was his insistence that I must understand things his way. And you see already, I mean, I just went through that with Marco and with my mother. And all. No, 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 no. Anybody who tells me this is how it is, I'm not having anything to do with them. And yet, after reading you and discovering that, oh no, Vaeni says I've got to read Kingsley, I went back and I didn't read all of it, but I started reading in his book, Reality, the one where he does the, God, is it the Empedocles thing or
Parmenides.
yeah, it's a Parmenides thing, and I could see through his annoyed insistence that people really have to see this, and I thought, ooh, this is good. This is really good. I had and maybe still have problems with um, um, his style of display, which is one thing that
Yeah.
I didn't have with you. You know, I
Well, I
mean,
think part of his insistence wasn't just you need to see it my way. I thought his insistence was, hey, all of my academic colleagues already do know all of this. They're sort of lying to you by omission. I thought that was kind of his, no?
yeah, yeah. I mean, well, I mean, they know. I mean, they know it in the sense that they know that it's there, but they're very proactive about ignoring it.
Hmm.
I think that's his point. I mean, he's certainly not telling us that those academics know the truth. He's telling us that those academics see these aspects, but they don't want to have anything to do with it.
So, what is the disconnect, I mean, between the scholars who want to study this stuff, and then there are people like Jung or Peter Kingsley, or now with the psilocybin, there are people who will study it but will never take it. What is the thing of not wanting to engage with it on the level of the people who are your colleagues who say that if you engage with it this way, your life comes alive in a whole different way and you will understand this in a way you can't from like reading books and coming up with your own rational theories? Why don't they engage it that way? What is the hesitation there?
I'm trying to speak from a place of personal knowledge. I think it's I think it's complicated. I think there are a lot of levels to it. And this is actually personally really important. And one of the things I thought we might get to today is is epistemological in the technical term. I mean, who do you trust? Okay. Who do you trust as a source of authority? And I think for academics, but not just them, but let's stay with them. You know, they've gone through a gazillion years of education, and they've learned who they trust in scholarly ways. Like if you're a philosopher, you know that you should read Plato and Kant and Hegel, or not, depending upon your portions of philosophy, and you know who the trustworthy scholars were because you were told who they are. You know, a lot of it is just because you were taught by people who said, oh, this person you should trust. This is the best scholar of X. And you just say, well, she seems to know what she's talking about. And then eventually, you know, so what the thing that happens, and this is in culture as a whole, but it's you know it's more finely honed in academia. So you get to a place in academia where you've published and you're respected, and you have this whole structure of trusted sources and ways of knowing and all that. And then this wacky person comes in. And if you're really defended, you simply brush them away. Um, if you're, I mean, John Mack is a maybe I could think of a better example, but he's the classic example. You know, world-renowned psychiatrist, Harvard professor, you know, and somebody says, "Hey, you ought to listen to these people. Is there fucking anything?" And as a scientist, he thinks, hmm, this is very interesting. There's all these experiencers who claim that they've been abducted by UFOs. That sounds like an interesting research topic. No, no emotional, and just like, I know crazy people and I know them quite well. And this does sound very interesting. And he talks to one. And he thinks, that guy's not crazy. Huh. Let's talk to another one. Oh boy, this guy's not, hmm, these are not, oh shit. And it's that oh shit moment, you know, where he thinks these are not crazy people and they're telling me similar. This is really weird. And at that point, it's like you got options. You can say, fuck this, I'll lose my chair in psychology. Or, God damn, this is like, I'm starting, And then, of course, you know what happened. I mean, maybe your listeners do. I mean, people said John Max lost his shit. He's gone insane. We got to kick him out of the department. Um, and so there's external forces, and then but primarily there's the who are your sources of authority? And John Mack was a person who was looking these, and here's the thing that you pointed out to me a few weeks ago. He looked at these people and he listened to them and he thought, I trust this guy. He's not bullshitting me because I know what bullshit looks like. And this person really had this experience. What do you do with it then? Well, you listen to 30 or 40 more and you trust every single one of them on a human level. And they're all telling you some stuff that kind of fits together. And at that point, you're screwed. And so to put it in my experience with Iboga, which until 2 or 3 years ago, I would have, I don't have any way to assess the reality. I just knew there were crazy people who did a lot of drugs and found it very transforming. That's a legitimate story. This is my version of the John Mack story. I go down there the second time I take it. I didn't really meet someone, but there was a personified presence very briefly. One of my students subsequently said, well, do you think she was real? My response was, to my own surprise, I don't give a shit. Oof, at which point I realized, oh, I'm gone now, man. I've just let go of that last category. It actually doesn't matter to me whether she was real by any prior definition of real that I might have had, because I'm in unexplored territory and I don't really care. I am going to be, I mean, I am apparently behaving as if she is, though I'm still in limbo there. It's not a relevant question at this point in my life. And so engaging with the impossible is like that. You know, all your categories, you've lived it. All your categories, well, you started so early that maybe you weren't already hardened into categories whereby this was impossible, you know.
Hmm.
So that's a kind of response.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think that's actually the right mature place to be with it. Because I get into trouble sometimes with the Seth people for saying that Seth isn't real, because they're very attached to Seth having to be real, and I don't think Seth is real. But I think if you get something out of Seth, that can be real. It can bring you into even synchronistic whatevers that change your life that then make you think that Seth was real. It doesn't matter. I think all of everything from the psychedelics to the quote unquote alien to you going to see a psychotherapist is all, you got to get right with yourself first. Like, that's just it. Like, everything in the universe is screaming for you to get right with yourself before you can have a further conversation. And so it doesn't matter, don't get stuck in the mire of like, I've got to prove this paranormal thing is an actuality, What's the actuality is that you're screwed up and there's something there acting on you, whether it's you that you've divorced from yourself and put out here like a schizophrenic, or it
Mhm.
really is something else. Doesn't matter. It matters that you see what's going on here and get to work.
This is important to me. What do you, first of all, I really don't know anything about the Seth experience. I don't know. That's way outside. I'm too old to, yeah. I mean, I have some vague notion, but what do you mean when you say Seth isn't real? Are you referring to the kind of reality that they say Seth has?
Yeah, I'm saying that I don't think that there was a channeled entity named Seth that Jane Roberts channeled. I think she was a product of her times. I think that,
Mhm.
I mean, I think that she was a woman with a learned woman with a lot to say, and uh, it came out unconsciously or whatever at this patriarchal Seth voice that could say
Okay.
the things and be heard at a time in society when she couldn't. And she was open to the
Okay.
idea that Seth wasn't real and that it was her. She was the first one to say, this might be me. I don't know that this is a real entity I'm channeling.
O-
So I
Okay.
would just submit that it was not, because
Okay. All right.
there's
All right.
nothing going on there that you can't already know.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. I see what you're saying. There's nothing going on there that you could not
But then
already know.
people say to me when I say that, they say, but I didn't know any of this stuff. Of course it. Well, but yeah, you didn't.
You
But
didn't. Yeah. Yeah.
and if you get
Yeah.
something out of it, great, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if, like, if she's talking to herself in this way, that's her still trying to like work on herself. And if you can hear it and get something out of it, that's still you trying to work on yourself. If you go into the jungle and do ayahuasca, that's the being there is likely trying to get you to work on yourself, trying to get you to see
Oh,
something.
sure. Oh, sure. Sure. No, absolutely. But what
It's like
I mean,
self-help all the way down.
okay. 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 No, that's actually, yeah, that's pretty nice. I like that. My quibble would be that even for Jung and Hillman, although not Corbin, he just didn't go there. The notion of self is pretty indistinct and malleable, and Jung thought that there were lots of partial personalities inside any given person, which, when they became too independent, could make you ostensibly mad. But I think both of them saw what they called both Hillman and Jung called what they called the ego as being just kind of a placeholder. And so the notion of a stable, um identifiable self is kind of a mistake in the first place, and that insofar as you're able to let go of that, you'll probably be better off. So rather than saying that the Jane Roberts partial personality Seth wasn't real, you could also say neither was she.
Right, yeah.
And that gets what Hillman would have said, and I think Jung would have agreed, is that to make your claim, they would say to a Seth person, um, it's you're making a mistake of misplaced concreteness. You're saying that Seth is real, but no person is real in the sense that you're trying to make Seth. You're trying to turn Seth into a mini god or an idol, so that you can then trust. And yeah, don't do that.
Right. But to whatever extent that the self, even as an illusion, is here and existing, that self is projecting.
Yeah.
So I would say that something like Seth is a projection uh, of the
See, I'm
illusion.
not willing to do that with my Iboga figures.
No, I think that's different.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think there are differences for sure. I'm just saying
Okay.
there are certain things that I do, because you were saying like maybe I'm open to everything, and it's like I'm open to everything until I figure it out, and then once you figure something out, you got to like go with the thing that you figured out. You know what I mean? So I could be open to channeling until I
Mhm.
see like, oh, wait a minute, no, there's something else. That's not what it is. Like there's still a level of discernment,
Yeah,
which
yeah, yeah,
can
yeah,
come
yeah.
across as judgment, and maybe it is judgment. I mean, that's not,
Well,
essentially it is
it
judgment.
is judgment that, but that's not a bad thing because, and here comes the associated part of all this for someone trained as a critical thinker, which I certainly was, um, is that one source of um, small k knowledge is who you end up who end up being your authority figures, and that has social and historical and all sorts of reasons. But the other one is the critical thinking part, because, so I was taught that I should pay attention to, Heidegger, Husserl, whatever. But then I was also trained to think critically, and that's hard to do. And people were accusing John Mack, to stay with that example, of having this great background in who to trust, but then that he had lost his critical faculties when he started believing these experiencers. And Jung is quite clear, at least I haven't read the Memories, Dreams, and Reflections for a really long time, but he says when he dropped down into that darkness, he says, yeah, you gotta bring your critical faculties, because if one of those guys tells you to turn around and shoot your wife, you don't want to do
Right.
it. And and one of the Jeff Kripal is another one of my touchstones here. He is willing to bring in reports of experiences that most academics are not. And then he's very clear, or at least tries to be, about what critical apparatus, critical thinking evaluatory methods one wants to use with that. And which all of which I think is fantastic. Now I go down to Brazil, and I have been sucked into this alternate reality, and it is having and has had um, profoundly liberating effects on my personal and psychological life, which if I weren't paying any attention to how those things happened, I would say they're all absolutely positive and wonderful. And I have not yet reached a point where I've had to ask the question, I mean, when does it happen that I have to be careful? Right. So I kind of hesitate to do this, but let's pretend that when I go down there this time, I probably shouldn't do this. I don't mean this. I don't mean this. This is just, it could be. And I meet some utterly persuasive visionary figure that tells me that I am the Messiah. And I come out of the experience that weekend. I don't tell anybody because now I'm going to tell people. And I come back up here and I start letting it be known that I am the Messiah. Then I've gone insane. Then I've gone insane. By any measure, by my measure, I have then lost it because I'm taking something that, at the moment anyway, is deeply personal, period, Gnostic, individuating, and letting it out into the public space in a way which is at least really problematic. And then it's out of my hands to be the judge. If I get, see, so I guess this comes, the question that I'm trying to ask, I have already answered. When someone like John Mack or Jeremy Vaeni looks in my eyes and I say, I am the Messiah. If you're then convinced, then we're both fucked.
Yeah.
You know?
So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's up to you to really ask, okay, why did this happen?
Well, but what if
Why
I
was I told
can't?
this?
What if I can't? What if I'm so totally taken over by it that I can't? Then it's up to you.
Well, that's right, but I would say you're full of shit. I mean, that would there would be a full stop there if you were to approach me with this.
No, no, yeah, no.
I would have to remind you, you've got to see why this was said to you. This is not you're the
Okay, and
Messiah.
okay, no, this gets at this gets at my question. What, and maybe it's obvious, but it's not obvious, I think. What are your criteria then for judging my experience? So I come back and I say, I had this incredibly powerful experience of being the Messiah, but I know it was just mine. And boy, it's transformed my life and my relationships. It's fantastic. That's one. Part two
Uh-huh.
is I had the exact same experience as that guy over there, and I am the Messiah. How do
Well,
you what is your criterion for distinguishing?
simple. It's you've already distinguished it. One is it's mine personally. The other is I have something for you and the world. And you don't have something for me in the like, okay, what is it? Let's hear you out. But if somebody
Ah,
comes to
oh,
you in the experience and says you're the Messiah, the answer to me is why do you trust the phenomenon? Why do you trust the literal and why are you so literal with it? I mean, you're not literal with a dream. Like maybe there's something else going on here, you know? If I were to come to you and say you're the Messiah, or your neighbor, you
yeah.
wouldn't believe them. But a plant tells you you're the Messiah, and so you're the Messiah. Like I would just get you to start to question these things. But I wouldn't get you to start to question these things if you just took it as what it probably is for, which is your own personal cleanse or whatever. Because then
This
that's you.
there seems something subtly wrong with how I'm about to turn this, and I'm not quick enough to pick up what it is. But I strongly there's something wrong with doing this. Um, why can't I've almost answered it myself, but the question would be, well, why can't I say that about you? Fuck Jeremy Vaeni. Why? He's obviously crazy. Except
You
what
can.
you're, but,
You
but,
just did. You can.
yeah, I know. But what you're not doing, and what's implicit in the idea of me announcing publicly that I am the Messiah, is that's a power play. And what you're doing is not a power play. You say I have the truth, but it's not a power play.
Well, I don't say I have the truth. I mean, words matter on these things
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
I
No,
think
no,
like
please do that.
and I can't remember what it was, but I was watching your lectures from your last not class, whatever you want to call it, seminars,
Yeah.
talks, and there are things where you said, "I think I can say this." Jeremy would say this, and it was basically correct, but there were little word choices that make it
Yeah.
incorrect, which is
Okay.
what we do. Like to me, to my mind, to my ear, this is what we do to not hear, and then
Hmm.
people can interpret as they wish. You know what I mean? Like that's just what's
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't have anything that I remember as an example, but it's the same thing here. It's like there's just little twists of. So I don't know. I guess my point is like it's not that I have truth. It's that we are that we are all that. So, but I know that, and you don't, and
Yeah.
you
Okay.
knowing
That's
it isn't the thing, being it is the thing. So if
yeah.
you care to engage with that at all, you've got to sit with yourself and come to it and arrive as that, not as a knowledge, not as a knowing, but literally your being. You are that. You are that truth consciousness. The first person experiencing of that is you. And if it's not you, then you're just unconscious of it. Now, because you're unconscious of it, how do you know that I'm not just self-aggrandizing? You don't know that, which is why, again, it's circular. You got to do it yourself. And if you don't, then you can either be my buddy and trust me or not. And that's, whatever.
Yes. There's something, I mean, I love that. And I think in maybe something like this, it's difficult for those of us who have not had that experience to hear the subtleties in your description there
well, here's the thing. I'm sorry. Let me just throw this out there, because I was just listening to Ken Wilber, integral psychologist, talking about all of this and saying that the thing about nothingness and the annihilation of self, or the death of self, that this is basically everywhere in all the religions in some form or another. Like, we've all heard it, and yet when you hear me say it, it sounds like I've never heard this before. And I think part of the reason for that, and Ken Wilber, where Ken Wilber goes wrong as well, unfortunately, is like, because those things like Zen, like deep meditation, like all the things that you call gnosis, the Sufism and all of that, are facsimiles. They are within the human conscious framework already. They are something that somebody experienced legit, and now we're living in the story of that having happened. And that's what the paths are to quote unquote nothingness. But it's not real nothingness. It's it's nothingness adjacent. Does that make sense? So it's like, so even though we've heard it before, and even though people cling to experience it through repetitive meditations and stuff, that still ain't it, which is why we're all still a-holes even after we come back from spiritual experiences.
I'm I think I'm within reach of understanding what you're saying, but let me ask this. In each of those traditions which claim to be able to provide a path to whatever this is, was there an original, in your view, must there have been an original experience of God self-consciousness, which then gave rise to the idea of the path?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, then we're on board, and that's very much. I think that that's what Corbin's intuition was, and maybe Jung's, although I don't really know about that. But it lies at the heart of Corbin's notion that every institutional religion is going to go off wrong, because as soon as you institutionalize any of this, poof, you've lost your chance. I think he intends to say something rather like what you're saying.
Well, and also with Jung, I mean, it sounds like, again, to get there through archetypal work and dream work and all of that is like, I don't think he had a death of self. I think he had a recontextualization. He had a transpersonal moment, but that transpersonal moment isn't the thing that I'm talking about. And I think the two things get confused.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'd be interested.
But I would think that he's the one confusing them too. I think
that seems plausible.
Probably thinks that that's it, and it's not it. It's still in the mind of, it's kind of like the universe, you are the universe, right? And so it's trying to keep you here. If you have a novel experience that adds on to the universe doesn't want you to then leave. It wants to, just like you and me, just like the sense of self, this nebulous self, this nebulous illusory self, even though it seems to be a bunch of things, wants to grow. We want to evolve. We want to add on to ourselves. We want to be in control. And that's the universe too. Like, the universe wants that through you. So That's why you're going to change archetypes. That's why you're going to waft into the man bun, or the temptation is going to be there to see yourself that way because you want to be recontextualized. You don't want contextualization to go away.